stand up just so that we can hear you?
The question for all three of the groups, they're talking about ending the Cuban embargo, but
Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, yeah, I've been in the Army 10 years, man. I'm partially deaf.
the question is about ending the Cuban embargo.
Yeah, Cuban embargo.
Okay. Well, from ending that, you're talking about opening up a free trade. The question is, I have for all three groups, what kind of policies would you like to institute? You know, I mean, how would free trade actually help Cuba? And a lot of free trade agreements have actually caused immigration issues and greater foreign policy issues. I mean, what actual solutions would you have besides just ending the embargo?
I actually, can I take this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to start, and then because I think he wanted a response from everyone, but go ahead.
I think this idea of like free trade agreement is kind of contradictory. I don't think there should be regulations on private trading between these two countries. I don't think that that's the government's job, either government's job. And I think that, one of the biggest reasons we created this embargo in the first place was to try and destroy Cuba's economy because they wouldn't have the import-export profitability of trading with the United States. If we ended this embargo and just open up free trade, they would get the benefits of, like that free market boosting their economy as well as helping ours.
Okay. Aggie Solidarity, do you have a
well, I would like to see something more along the lines of fair trade. I mean, we have to remember that Cuba is already has trade programs or policies with other countries, and I would say perhaps even kind of like work with them and see what they have in that sense. I don't really think that we should be the ones to dictate what we're going to regulate or what we're not going to.
Well, and I think one of the big issues, and you kind of touched on it, is that we go through, especially in Latin America, and force free trade down to or so-called free trade down people's throats, right? Which is something that I think any person with a conscience should feel very uneasy about. But Cuba would benefit from trade, surely. I don't believe that we should be enforcing free trade, even an ideologically sort of pure free trade, not the so-called free trade we have now. I think is harmful for the most vulnerable populations. Right now we have, since NAFTA and CAFTA have taken effect, we have these free trade policies that open up the borders, that let big transnational corporations come into places, that kill people's abilities to survive as a small farmer, to kill people's abilities to survive as small merchants. And that's really what's driving migration currently, to not only here, but to the cities. And so we really need to look critically at what free trade does, and what opening up markets like that does, and deregulation does. And I don't think that's the way to go forward.
okay. NMSU Democrats?
I have a feeling you just asked that so I can mess up on Cuba again. I think that lifting the embargo would benefit Cuba and the United States, as much of the panel said. So I don't have much more to add. That would help them, and I think that's something that definitely is worth looking at and evaluating in the future. See, I did mess up again.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if, I hate to impose this on people, but unless you guys want me to write notes when we're all late to class tomorrow morning because we stay here all night debating these topics, maybe if we could sort of come around here so that I could get an idea of, well, I guess that's not really workable. Okay, you go ahead.
Yes, wonderfully interesting. I'm an old man, so wonderfully, I carried the signs, we pushed for civil rights against Vietnam and all of that back in the 60s. I was there in Florida and heard the trucks going by whenever the Russians were going to move missiles into Cuba. So, there's been a little bit of experience. deeply involved, we're deeply involved in the Houston area drugs. My question is this: legalizing drugs, neat idea on the surface. The question is, who produces the drugs? Who markets the drugs? How do you control the marketing? What do you do with the program? I guess that's one way we probably solve our national deficit. But how do you manage and control the legalization of drugs? Conceptually, I agree, but how do you do it practically? That's my question.
Okay, so how do you manage and control the legalization of drugs?
Yes.
Is this for a
That's for
specific-
everyone. I hope, but I'd like to hear a really good idea about
Okay.
we legalized cartels in Mexico.
Okay, would you like to start, NMSU Democrats?
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I don't have an answer. I don't think any of us do. It sounds like a great theory. You're right, that would save us. That would save our economy. That would save this debt. But how we can actually implement these policies, and a lot of these policies that have been defended tonight, how we can actually go about implementing them without causing a shock in the economy, without all these negative effects is really, it sounds great, but I'm not sure that it will actually work in reality.
The Dutch have found the problems
Well, basically, I mean, you end the war on drugs. This is just ending at the federal level. Now, you give the states the options of what substances they want to legalize, you know. And I mean, you got in Boulder, Colorado, they have it decriminalized, and they have marijuana decriminalized. But if you just leave it up to the states, then the states can decide which substances they want to legalize.
I'd also like to point out that there are substances that are legal today. Cigarettes, alcohol, caffeine, these are all, you know, substances that we ingest into our bodies. We don't have a problem with alcohol. You know, if businesses pop up, they produce these substances.
Would you get, instead of having distilleries, would you have places that would grow marijuana or produce heroin or cocaine?
I don't see why not.
States.
How would you do it? Who would do it?
Businesses would do it.
You'd have commercialized it?
I think that if you open up you open up drugs to the free market, people will get into that enterprise. If you look at businesses like Philip Morris, I'm sure they would, you know, they already have the plantations, they already have the fields, you know, for tobacco. I'm sure they'd love to hop on the marijuana train and make some money.
A new job for our chemistry majors. Aggie Solidarity, do you have a response?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the current economy, if you make it just like any other product, then you take away the incentive towards having cartels and having drug gangs and stuff like that in the first place. So that kind of solves that problem right there. It solves the violence problem. But going along with that, you would need to have massive programs. If you legalize drugs anywhere, you're going to need to have massive programs in order to help people who are addicted, in order to solve that problem too. But not through criminalizing the consumption. But furthermore, why we need to legalize it is more for me, not because of what's happening here, other than locking up a huge part of the population for drug violations. But what's happening in Latin America, where there's literally tens of thousands, where there have literally been in the last 25 or so years, hundreds of thousands of people who have died because of these policies. And legalizing that there really is not an issue of consumption. It's the issue that they're fighting our drug war for us. They're killing themselves for us. For them, consumption isn't the issue. It's the consumption here that's driving all of that violence, and that's why we need to take the lead in legalizing that in order to stop the wars and the deaths south of our border that we have such a large part in creating.
Yes, in the checkered shirt.
Is that me?
Yes.
All right, so the Arab Spring went remarkably untouched throughout this debate. So I just wanted to ask about the Egyptian revolution in Libya. I guess it was touched on by a couple of groups. trying to talk about like the Egyptian revolution in Libya and now occurring in Syria. Should we be intervening, if at all, to assist these fledgling democracies? And if so, what should we be doing? What methods should we be taking to assist new democracies forming in the Middle East?
Is this for specific?
It's for everybody. Start wherever.
Okay, Aggie Solidarity, would you, I'm going around in a sort of, would you like to start, or? Okay.
Well, you know, that's part of it is no, we shouldn't be intervening. That very idea that we intervene in any way needs to go out. There are things that we can do to cooperate with people. When people are living under oppressive regimes, there are things that we can do to cooperate with them, to help them be able to have that sort of autonomy, to help them be able to have that the ability to shape their own societies in the ways that they want. But so what we were saying with expanded sort of systems for justice and things like that, that's the sort of things that we should be putting our focus in. Programs for training of doctors, of teachers, of people like that who can go in and therefore shape their own societies, not having it be forced down their throats by us. Those are the things that we should be putting our efforts into. You know, if there are tragedies that happen because we don't intervene, that's something that might happen. If we don't intervene in Syria, there's probably a hell of a lot more people who are going to die. Well, actually, no, because if we intervene in Syria, there's probably a hell of a lot more people that are going to die because of the violence that comes out of that, right? But the basic point is that we can't go in and intervene unilaterally and force it down people's throats, that we should be putting our efforts into programs that promote cooperation and solidarity with the people who are trying to shape their own societies.
Okay, NMSU Democrats?
I agree with Aggie Solidarity that we can't intervene in all of those. In all the countries that you mentioned, they all have very distinct problems. So we can assist in whatever they need, but each of those would need to be evaluated in a different way. So intervene is a strong word, but we should assist.
Okay, Aggies for Ron Paul?
I'd like to point out to the Democrats that the Democratic President Obama did intervene. He did bomb in Libya. So we shouldn't be doing that. I think actually, I'm really glad you brought it up because I think he's, you know, I loved following the Egyptian revolts in Tunisia before that, and then, you know, Syria and Libya. It's so wonderful for me because I see these countries and they are rising up on their own 2 feet and they are doing it on their own, and they don't need us, you know, like, and I think it's proof, you know, like these countries are taking their country into their own hands and they're doing it on their own. And it's amazing watching these civilians fight these police and win and you know, overcome their own governments. And I think that the best thing that we as Americans can do is be the beacon of democracy and freedom and lead by example and show these people how it's done and show them by example and not by intervention.
Well, you were next in my line, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Yeah, you were, I mean, I have my mental line going.
All right, well, my question is along the lines of this gentleman's question about legalizing narcotics, except for the fact, I mean, you don't hear about any, like, malicious crime, like a violent act committed by someone smoking a blunt, according to, like, someone smoking a meth pipe or a crack pipe. You don't hear about someone that's stabbing a baby, but that's not my point. Wouldn't we pull ourselves out of, like, at least out of our economic slump if we legalized marijuana? We wouldn't have to go to some random sketch dude on the corner, like some of the sack dudes, you know? I mean, we could go to Walgreens, we can go to dispensary, and it take less power away from the warlords of the drug cartel, wouldn't it? And we'd be putting it in our own hands. I mean, we could produce it ourselves, and we could make the money to profit off if we could tax it right. And that is my question for Aggie Solidarity. How are we going to, what are your views on that? Like, how do you see us taxing it? Like, how do you see us selling it? Because honestly, I think we could do a lot better. But I think if we just get pointed in the right direction, it could help us in the long run. Also, yeah.
Aggie Solidarity, your views on legalization and taxation and not having to go down to the corner and...
Well, I mean, really, as far as legalization is concerned, I mean, it really, you know, in our current economic system, if you make it just like any other product, if you tax it just like any other product, any other consumable, then okay, fine. Ideally, for us, coming from our background, ideally we would want to be in a society where that sort of thing is not driven by the profit motive, where the production of that sort of thing is not driven by the profit motive, because if you legalize that sort of thing, you're going to have it be just like fruit or vegetables or something like that, which is based on an exploitative system of the worker, of the people who actually produce those goods. So that's where we're coming at it from our side. Ideally, we would want that sort of production to be collective. Ideally, we would want that sort of production to be public. Obviously, for practical purposes, would we be able to do that right now? No, not with the society that we live in the present day. That's somewhere where I think that we would like to get. But for right now, if we legalize it and make it like any other product, at least we're taking away the extreme violence that is associated with having it criminalized.
Thank you.
Yes, you, and then you, and then you, okay?
Okay, I want to make a brief statement also, just saying that you come in here, listen to this, like at least I hear like two tables that really have their, I see that they have like emotional content to what they're saying and aren't just saying taglines that you hear on the media, like the two tables on the right. And it's rare to hear this because all you hear is the mainstream media, which I feel there's only one table that's kind of toting that line. So a question for all three of you, something that's not discussed much, is the rule of law broken in the United States when we have an administration that assassinates U.S. citizens with no due process, what we used to know judicial branch? No, it's a secretive panel that's selected by secret officials that report to Obama if it's okay to assassinate. And when we use drone attacks, predator attacks, we do this intervention in sovereign nations, and all of it is neither confirmed or denied in existence. You see it on the New York Times, the administration refuses to confirm or deny the existence of these programs, which we know already killed Anwar. So with that in mind, is there no rule of law because they don't want the court to investigate with these state secrets saying, no, I'm sorry, you can't know about this state secret. I'm sorry, this will authority defense state secret. So if there's no rule of law, there's no way to see if it's legal. Is there any rule of law in the United States right now? Is the system broken?
I think we originally had a rule of law, and that was the Constitution. But now, thanks to the last two administrations, that's getting picked away. Protesting is now a minor form of terrorism, and you can be detained indefinitely for suspicion of terrorism. Right? I mean, that's our First Amendment right there, out the window. And assassinating our own citizens, I don't understand why we're not in the streets. I don't understand why we're letting people in this administration get away with this. This is ridiculous. We have rights. It's already listed out. We already have our freedoms. And the administrations, this current one and the last one, are slowly picking away at that. And that's what we need to stop. We need to end this. We need to not only end the foreign wars and the war on drugs, but we need to end the war on liberty too.
NMSU Democrats, do you have a response? To his...
I would like to go out to the streets right now. That's, no, I don't. No.
Well, what are your own personal views, if not as representatives of the Democrats as yourselves? What do you think about, how do you react to this, or how do you feel about that this could happen in the United States, where you could have basically execution with no judicial process, basically, like you said, cutting off everything what the Constitution stands for out of the picture. Basically, it's only paper, but if we don't define it ourselves by our actions and by upholding it, then it's nothing. It is just paper. There is no rights. It's only privileges.
I can't make a judgment. I don't know enough about this issue to say that that's
Okay.
something that I would, okay, I can read articles about it on, I can look further into it, form an opinion on it, but as of right now, sounds, don't know.
Perfect.
A response from Aggie Solidarity?
All right, well, I mean, I kind of have a little trouble with what you're saying about rule of law. I mean, well, I think I get what you're saying. And I agree with you about, you know, executions, extra legal executions, I guess you might call them. But essentially, I mean, they believe that they're acting within the law. You know, they believe that they're acting within loopholes in the Constitution and things like that. And I think, you know, I mean, honestly, and this isn't like an insult, but I think saying, you know, that we just need to go back to the Constitution is kind of a cop-out, because what we need to be focusing on is for whom, for what interests in our society, for what classes in our society is the power being executed for. And this is getting a little bit more theoretical than practical, which I really didn't want to do. But I think that that's what we need to be focusing on. We need to be focusing on who this violence is for, not necessarily within what laws it happens. You know, if we just say that we need to follow the Constitution when we want to declare a war or something like that, that's not something that would necessarily be so hard to do. You know, if they had really wanted to declare war officially in Iraq, if they had really wanted to, if they had gone after it, they could have got it done in 2003. They could have had an official war in 2001 against Afghanistan. It's just easier for them not to do it by not having it officialized. So, you know, there's a lot of validity in what you're saying, I think, but I think it's not going to the very root of the problem, which is who does the law work for? And I don't think that you guys addressed that. That's very theoretical, so I'm sorry.
Well, with the,
Yeah, I want to make sure before we lose too many more audience members that we do get to our last two people who kept signaling to me. But if you have a brief response for Aggie Solidarity, please.
Well, we've responded, and we'll just keep going with questions.
Okay.
Unless,
every American is entitled to due process of law, and that's exactly like the Barack Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, George Bush signed the Patriot Act. Personally, I'm opposed to all this. Everyone is entitled to their due process of law.
Okay. Thank you. Yes?
With tonight actually being about immigration, I know that there was a lot of fun other topics of, you know, war and everything like that. But in immigration, every single group said, we don't want to break up families and then kind of swept it under the rug, moving on, let's talk about some war and stuff. We are breaking up families, and we should break up families, because coming over here illegally is illegal, okay? Just because you come over here and poop, have a baby, and I don't mean poop as in like the actual term, to like, you know, but poof, have a baby, doesn't mean that, well, I came here and had a baby and now they're a citizen, so I should get to stay, you know? You shouldn't just be able to, oh, well, you know, you did this bad thing, but now we're just gonna, you know, say that it's okay because you have a kid, and we have to think about the kid. I want you guys to actually tell me why they should stay, having done this illegal act.
Would someone like to start? Okay.
All right. Well, essentially, the short answer is that that law is arbitrary. We could just as easily say that they're not illegal, and it would make it all fine, according to that. The law is arbitrary. That's the main point. But secondly, it's that you're punishing people who have had an extreme violence exerted on them systematically from where they come from. where most immigrants come from, they don't have any sort of opportunity for advancement. And they live in societies which suffer extreme deprivation, largely because of the policies that we've created, largely because of the free trade policies that we've created, especially in Latin America. And so our position is that if you don't address that first, if you don't address what actually motivates them, what is actually the push factor, which we are largely responsible for, until you address that, you have no moral authority to punish those people for reacting to that and trying to come here and better their lives.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Okay, I agree with you. I agree with you that we shouldn't punish people for wanting to have a better life. But on the same stand, I feel that a zebra can't give birth to a tiger. So a non-American